that, you can create a real story with real emotions, real things you want to know about. You follow those characters, you feel for and with them, but at the same time, all three are a reflection of higher ideas, bigger ideas, more symbolic, more abstract ideas and notions. And so, hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today, a little bit of a clickbaity title perhaps, or certainly in fact. How could a novel be perfect? A novel perception is so personal, it requires so much investment from the reader that it is probably impossible to find one novel that everyone relates to and likes as much as the other. Nevertheless, there might be ways to think about the construction of a novel that is so satisfying, so rich, that it could be a template for basically excellent novels, literary novels in general. We're going to do that today by having a very quick look at a very famous novel, an English novel by Greene from 1955, The Quiet American. Greene, of course, is one of the main names in English literature in the 20th century. He's published many books. Typically, his output is organized a little bit in two ways. One is the sort of serious Catholic-inspired part of it. Brighton Rock is a famous one. The Power and the Glory, The Heart of the Matter, for example, in which Greene, who was a Catholic himself, grapples with ideas of morality, the relationship between morality and human nature, the relationship between morality as a concept and the church inspired, the religious morality. So he's not trying to convince anybody to become a Catholic, of course. He is, in fact, using the novel as a way to think about those concepts for himself as a Catholic, but as somebody wondering what things are in general, beyond these religious beliefs. And of course, the second side of Greene that's very famous is his more spy-like novels, sort of John le Carré-like novel almost, although the style and the atmosphere is slightly different. And here, Confidential Agent, The Quiet American, we want to talk about today, Our Man in Havana, The Human Factor, and of course, the screenplay that he wrote for The Third Man, the wonderful film, The Third Man, and which he turned into some sort of novella after the film was finished. Now, The Quiet American is a 1955 novel. It's important to remember, of course, very briefly that the historical context at that time, the French had been waging war in Vietnam for two or 3 years at the time, and the Americans themselves, as an emerging world power after the Second World War, the United States themselves were wondering, well, what to do in the Asian region in general, and specifically in Vietnam. And that is the context for the novel, in which we have basically three characters. There are, of course, secondary ones or tertiary ones, but we're not really interested in those. We've got three characters. There's sort of a middle-aged English journalist who's been covering the war between France and Vietnam for the past 2-3 years, who has a long career in journalism, who's not gone back to England for a while, and basically Fowler, his name is, and he's a bit of a washed out journalist a little bit, still reporting on the war, still making contacts with everybody, but also cynical. He's seen it all, of course, and he has lost a lot of the faith he may have had, perhaps, I don't mean religious faith, but faith in humanity perhaps, or faith in a brighter future. His counterpart is Powell, called Powell. He's an American. He's an operative from the CIA. And Powell is a young American who has written a book about war, but he's never seen war. He's analyzed war from afar in America, behind a desk, but it is the first time that he's actually on the ground. He has a youthful innocence, and one could say perhaps is an idealist, but he's an idealist in the sense of he believes in the good that a country like America can bring to the world. And the third character is one that unites them both. In the beginning of the novel, she is the lover of Fowler, the English journalist, Phuong, her name is, and she's a young Vietnamese girl who has a family, notably a sister who keeps coming back in the novel. And Phuong is basically having an affair. She's a lover of Fowler, and they live kind of happily, really, in some ways, together. It is detectable, of course, that the relationship between them is also, derived partly from the age difference. Fowler is much older than he is. And as we'll see in a second, of course, their relationship is both reminiscent of and symbolic of relationships between the countries themselves. And when Powell, the American CIA guy, comes on the scene, well, he falls for Phuong. He falls in love with Phuong. And so there begins a sort of love triangle, as it were, and a little tug of war between Fowler, the English guy, and Powell, the American one, where Phuong is basically the object of both their attentions and desire. That is the context, and that is what the novel is basically about. The novel is narrated by Fowler, the English journalist, and he simply relates what he does and what's happening in his own life, and that includes, of course, increasingly, certainly, the American CIA and Phuong, the Vietnamese lover that he has. Now, what am I taking that novel as an example of what could be stupidly termed a perfect novel? It is not in necessarily the impression that it makes on you, or its depth of feelings, or whichever thing that you're looking for in a novel, of course. So I am going to talk a little bit formally about this, because there are many novels in the world that I much prefer to this one. I simply admire this one very much. That is a very, very different question. I can fall in love with a novel while recognizing it has flaws. I don't really see many flaws in that one, even though it may not take me, engage me as much as many other novels have and hopefully will in the future. Well, it's really very simple. Basically, this is structurally incredibly well put together, quite simply because everything functions on basically 3 different levels. And that is the beauty of it. The beauty of it is that it is centered, as it were, and organized centrally from the human interest in the characters themselves, so the real characterization, and that human interest is itself symbolic of 2 other levels of relationships, a very sort of national or international set of relationships between England, America, and Vietnam, and certainly South Asia in general, and at a more abstract level, international relationships and notions of dominance, power, etc. So Fowler, we understand, is a washed-out, cynical English journalist, but he is also the representative of an empire, the British Empire. And the British Empire has been dominating, or had been dominating the world for many, many decades. But, of course, since, let's say, the interbellum, and certainly after the Second World War, it is very clear that England of 1955 is nothing like England from, let's say, 1855. And what does that mean? It means, of course, that here Fowler is both himself, but he is also symbolically England, that is, England on the wane, a middle-aged England who doesn't really belong anymore, who has become cynical about the rest of the world because it is much less than what it used to be. And of course the young Fowler, the ambitious Fowler, may feel in this novel that he has not fulfilled perhaps everything, and that his career has only shown him the dark side of things, and that basically there is very little left of what he promised when he was younger. Well, isn't that the case of England, of course, at the end of the Second World War? By the same token, Pyle, the American, is both himself as a character, but he is also symbolically his own country that is a youthful democracy, feeling very powerful, having intervened, of course, in the Second World War, and therefore being now the dominant force in the world, really. The dominant one technologically, financially, and also, to some extent, beginning to be the dominant one culturally as well. And so the young Pyle, the innocent, wide-eyed Pyle, is basically the symbol, the representation of what America wanted to be or presented itself as being, a country of opportunity, a country that was going to help and let's say bring peace to the rest of the world like it had done during the Second World War. And so we understand that Phu Ong, the Vietnamese lover of both men, originally only, of course, Fowler and then of both, Phu Ong herself is this country, her country, caught between those two forces, a waning European power and a youthful and increasingly dominating American power. And that both of them are basically centered on her country. She is a country, she's caught between both of them, and her own individuality, her own culture, is basically being squeezed out by the desires for both those countries. And what is fantastic here in terms of construction is that this level of national relations at the time, and so the political context itself, because make no mistake, Graham Greene here is passing comment on the political situation of 1955-54, of course. The third level is at the abstract level of ideas, notions, and again, of course, power, domination, interaction between countries in a general sense, of course, and all representations of international relations in general, of course. So aggression, peace, war, diplomacy, and at a more collective level, how to preserve oneself, how to live together collectively while preserving oneself, and ultimately the waning and the waxing and waning of power, of dominance, and how the big ones use the small ones for their own purposes. Of course, nothing has changed today, certainly. And here it is fully symbolized in those three characters. So that brings us back to the very first level, which is a very strong characterization in that novel, because those three characters are not simply symbols. They have flesh, they have bones, and they have emotions. Graham Greene was a supreme technical master. It is important to remind us ourselves of this. I often say on this channel, of course, how important it is, craftsmanship and mastery of technical tools, because without them you can't convey a wealth of information, you can't convey emotion, you can't convey richness behind the, let's say, surface layer of the novel. And Graham Greene was a master technician, so his style may not be the most warm or attractive sounding style that you will find, certainly not, but it does an incredible job of fleshing out those characters to such an extent that they exist as themselves and not only as symbols. But style and technical mastery also enables Graham Greene to draw, therefore, this connection between those fleshed out, breathing, living characters and the two symbolic levels that we can fix to them. And this characterization is basically taking very much into account the fact that the emotional states and the personality of those characters must be an echo of and a symbol of those abstract levels or those symbolic levels. So Fowler is a cynical man. Yes, he also has many regrets about the family left behind in England that he doesn't really want to see anymore, but he understands that he is missing something, but he understands that he doesn't care about missing it, and that is a problem in itself. He loves Fu Hong desperately, but he's always wondering why he loves her. Is it because she's young? Is it because she's beautiful? Is it because he's lonely? And these are real questions that people ask themselves, not just symbolically, but in truth. Pal is the same. He falls in love like crazy for Fu Hong. He's willing to abandon everything for her, or even abandon his position in Vietnam and be sent back to America. He is also the epitome of sort of gentleman politeness. So he asks politely Fowler what do you think, because I'm attracted to her, and well, if you left, perhaps there could be something between me and her, all those things. And Pal is a young man who easily falls in love, who has no experience of the wider world, who doesn't really understand things at a deep level, and who has no real understanding of the context. He doesn't know the people on the ground, he doesn't know how it feels, and therefore when he comes in as a full-blown, completely insulated from reality young American. And Fu Hong is the same. She is divided. We can see that her sister urges her to continue with both Americans for gain, quite simply. And it is very clear between the discussion, when it comes to the discussion between, for example, her and her sister, it is very clear that for Fu Hong, those relationships are a matter of life or death. She has nothing. Her country is at war. There are no prospects of peace or reconciliation or any progress for her in her life. Her life depends almost entirely, her safety depends almost entirely on those two men. And so it is difficult to know whether she loves Fowler, or for that matter, Pal, or whether she simply uses them. And both men are very much aware of that, but they don't care, or if they do care, they still want to go beyond caring about it. In other words, those three characters really exist, and that is the beauty and the absolute technical marvel of this novel and of this novelist in general. Graham Greene is a monster novelist. That is that you can create a real story with real emotions, real things you want to know about, you follow those characters, you feel for and with them, but at the same time, all three are a reflection of higher ideas, bigger ideas, more symbolic, more abstract ideas and notions. And so, in conclusion, perhaps, is that one way of describing what the perfect novel is? I don't think so, of course. As I said in the beginning, there are many novels that I much prefer to this one, but I admire this one very much, and I think that it is a great canvas for saying, okay, what do we expect from great literature? Just emotions? Is that enough? Just ideas? Is that enough? Just pyrotechnics and style? Is that enough? Just big sagas with a relationship with reality only? Is that enough? It's probably not enough on its own. It's got to find, of course, a coherence and a collective identity, as it were, to all those things. And in this case, The Quiet American by Graham Greene is still a great example of what a great literature writer does and tries to achieve and can achieve. And then afterwards, of course, the form that you want to give it, the tone of voice you want to give it, the type of narration, narrator, all those things will belong to each and every individual. But this could be seen as a canvas indeed for building a great novel. Do let me know, of course, which novel is the best for you, the one you prefer or the one you think is best, not necessarily the one you like the most. I'd be very happy to hear about that. In the meantime, thank you very much. Bye-bye.